The biggest person missing here is Christina Karam.
He was making bizarre claims, like he was Diddy's sex slave, and that Diddy had forced him to have sex with his girlfriend, Cassie.
Diddy allegedly, and his son allegedly, shoot some guy in a bathroom. There are some major dogs that are not barking here.
What if the largest names involved in Diddy's trial are the ones nobody is discussing? Candace Owens claims that she has discovered a stunning exclusion that turns everything around. Stay tuned while we expose who's mysteriously absent and why their disappearance might be the solution to the whole case.
He was making bizarre claims, like he was Diddy's sex slave, and that Diddy had forced him to have sex with his girlfriend, Cassie, and that he had contracted an STD from them and then had sued. And then he also talks about like the Black Boule and the Illuminati playing cards. And he's like,
relationship between Diddy and Cassie ended up being verified and true and sounded insane at that time. He also says that Diddy's a member of the Black Illuminati and that he would hear him on the phone discussing matters. And the biggest thing is saying that there's a hip hop agenda, and essentially they create these guys and enrich them, because really what they're doing, and in further parts of this video, on behalf of the feds, is that they're moving drugs throughout the United States.
Candace Owens recently made a bombshell on her podcast, and what she let slip has a lot of individuals asking tough questions regarding Diddy's trial. In the episode, she intimated there are some key players involved with Diddy that are seemingly disappearing from the picture. These aren't folks who have tangential connections or remote associations. They're individuals who, based on Owens, have been instrumental in shaping aspects of his career and life. The fact that their names are nowhere to be found in the media stories and court proceedings has raised an eyebrow on her part big time. She explained it simply: why are these figures with sufficient power and influence to possibly influence the industry not being held accountable along with Diddy? Owens highlighted the glaring lack of certain executives and personalities who have been working behind the scenes at some of the most crucial points of his career. She called it a selective silence in the media and asserted it was not an accident. On her podcast, she accused, when you start connecting the dots, it's as if an invisible hand is erasing key details and redirecting the conversation where it's safest. Some of the connections she detailed go deep. Owens specifically cited individuals connected to powerhouse record labels and entertainment conglomerates who have collaborated with Diddy throughout the years. She asked why these collaborations, which were at the forefront when it came to billion-dollar ventures and cultural milestones, are now invisible. For instance, she referenced Diddy's experience with former music ventures, where high-powered executives reaped enormous profits from projects he had initiated.
So she was all over the lawsuit, and you've had people since that have brought her up. And Skylar, I don't know, we actually wouldn't even be able to show that. And again, this is all allegedly, but this was the Ghislaine Maxwell that was always at his side. It has been alleged by people who say that they were abused by Diddy, that she was allegedly placing IUDs in women. People that have accused him of like a very aggressive form of rape have accused her of being the person that made all this happen. In Little Rod's lawsuit, he was explicit in saying that she was the supplier of all the drugs. She's just gone. Like she's just, for some reason, they thought we have to take down Diddy. But it was very clear in Little Rod's lawsuit that Diddy was kept high intentionally because of her, because she was instructing people to keep him drugged, allegedly on this pink cocaine, and she's gone. Like I could not find a trace of this woman on the internet.
That if Diddy's throwing all these parties, Universal Music Group is in some way financially involved. But the lawsuit alleges that they're directly financially involved. And the lawsuit alleges that Lucien Grange frequently attended them and probably funded some of them, and certainly had secret meetings, or at least allegedly had secret meetings with Diddy frequently.
In his bedroom.
Yeah, in his bedroom for an hour or more.
Lucien Grange has been a very powerful figure for a very long time. Started as with a totally different name, by the way. I don't trust,
you're the one that put me onto that rabbit hole.
Don't trust men that change their names, least of all 3 times, okay? A family that goes from Goldstein to G to Grange doesn't make sense to me. And you have him at the top of the food chain, heavily implied by Little Rod that they were allowing this to go on to get blackmail on certain people, and they just disappear him.
And I mean,
what's the logic here?
It's
no
understandable.
Evidence, there's tapes. Little Rod said there's nothing but tapes.
Tapes of everything.
And that Diddy was taping the people that were coming as well.
Yeah.
When he's mentioned in a Little Rod lawsuit as the fixer, to show you how extreme what he's being accused of is essentially he's the guy you call if you shoot somebody.
Yeah.
He intimates this scene in the lawsuit, Little Rod, where Diddy allegedly and his son allegedly shoot some guy in a bathroom. Little Rod is as this guy is bleeding out, cleaning up, trying to help this guy. He's very close or just outside of the bathroom. Little Rod might have been in the bathroom. And he knows that after Diddy and his son come up and shoot this guy, he's trying to apply pressure to the wound. And they know that you have to call this guy, and he'll get the correct person over at LAPD to come over, and they'll tell a lie. And he says that the next day the press ran a story that there was a drive-by shooting, and he's like, that's not what happened at all. And it made me really think about the book Chaos that so many people on my podcast have listened to and watched. I have listened to, and it's describing a corrupt LAPD with feds that are involved and know how to disappear certain things. And we know that to be factually true based on the Charles Manson murders. So this makes me super uncomfortable.
She questioned, why aren't they asked to clarify their role in what was done behind closed boardroom doors? Owens didn't let up. She gave examples of instances where these individuals vocally had Diddy's back or stood by him during significant industry moments. It's telling, she said, how these same individuals once used to be familiar faces in the crowd at his parties or front row attendees at his shows, but now they totally faded into the background. Her tone was laser sharp as she added, people need to be asking why no one wants to follow up with them. Surely they weren't merely spectators. The lack of these names, according to Owens, isn't merely strange. It might suggest greater forces at play. She questioned efforts that may have been made to protect certain individuals from scrutiny, perhaps for the sake of personal reputations or larger business entities associated with them. This observation has opened the floodgates for conjecture, especially as more individuals start digging into former collaborations and connections. One name she didn't hesitate mentioning was an executive she claimed had been a longtime presence in Diddy's life and might have vital information. Owens stated with a sense of resolve, this isn't a trial about one man. It's a complicated story involving movers and shakers across industries. Whether or not this individual will be subject to public or legal questions in the future is unclear, but Owens cast doubts on whether justice can completely be pursued without such figures. And yet Owens herself conceded this isn't the whole story in the same podcast. She suggested others may have something to add about these missing names. That's where comedian Theo Von comes into the conversation, providing his own insight and revelations to light.
I've never really quite understood why Diddy's fame has lasted this long, why he is so wealthy, how he's doing all of these extravagant things. Genuinely, I've never really quite understood it. And it's just interesting because when three things that seemed so crazy end up fact-checking true, he also mentioned in this, we didn't show this clip, but he mentions pink cocaine.
Yeah.
At that time, no one knew what he was talking about. Suddenly, Lil Rod's lawsuit is speaking about that exact same drug that he's saying is a combination of all sorts of drugs like MDMA and cocaine. And again, all of this is allegedly, but he says that essentially that's what Diddy is giving out at these parties that has people that is so high, rather. And then another piece of this, which we didn't show, which he said at that time in terms of saving Trump, was he says that he saw in the Illuminati card deck that they were going to try to assassinate Trump. Again, what year was this that Jonathan Odie was arrested?
That was 2018.
And we can also now confirm that he was indeed a sex slave to Cassie and Diddy because he's testifying at this trial.
The Von isn't exactly the first name you'd expect to pop up in a conversation about Diddy's trial, but when he weighed in, his comments created even more chaos around the missing names. Candace Owens highlighted on a recent episode of his podcast. Theo joked about how big stories like this seem to shed a lot of light, while keeping some people safely just out of frame. But beyond the humor, Theo appeared to back Owens' claims, suggesting that certain people connected to Diddy might be deliberately avoiding attention or worse, being protected. He touched on a name that's lingered in the background of the entertainment world for years, someone who has quietly influenced deals, campaigns, and industry trends, and whose ties to Diddy have remained surprisingly unexamined. Without naming anyone outright at first, Theo spoke about how certain power players often operate behind the scenes. It's not the loudest person in the room you got to watch for. He said, it's the guy who's too quiet to be noticed, hiding in the corner like a shadow moving real slick. Many assumed he was talking about long-standing business executives who worked with Diddy on major projects. These were individuals who, according to past reports, were instrumental in catapulting Diddy's career to the highest echelons of fame and financial success. Theo passionately questioned why these figures haven't been pressed for insight or accountability. I don't think it's just one guy on trial, he said, lowering his voice for emphasis. You have a whole crew that helped build and protect a legacy. His tone shifted from playful to reflective as he continued painting an image of an intricate network of influence and control operating far outside the public eye. Unlike Owens, whose presentation relied heavily on research connections and industry analysis, Theo leaned into anecdotal experiences. He recalled hearing rumors in the entertainment circles he accesses as a comedian. There are whispers, he said vaguely, about deals that should have been blown up years ago, but they weren't because someone somewhere made a problem go away now. I'm not saying I know specifics, but I do know there's something unsettling when certain names never seem to come up. While Theo's credibility on the matter isn't what Owens brings to the table, his words hit a nerve because of his earnest approach. As someone who's been in proximity to these worlds, yet not embedded in them, he offers an outsider's raw take. This makes his questions resonate with everyday audiences who might already feel the case is more complicated than it seems. He admitted he had no intention of becoming the face of criticism here.
His interview that Tupac is still alive
Yeah,
and he's in Cuba.
Drops it out of nowhere.
And that's been a major conspiracy that Tupac's still alive. I've never looked into that one. I just want to be very clear. But because I'm going back and I'm thinking it's just strange that everything this man said, or too much of what he said, has fact-checked true, which seems so bizarre. That another very bizarre claim he made, that Tupac's alive, he's in Cuba, and he's just like chilling and saying that, it just kind of gets you thinking about
All sorts of other things.
what is reality?
All sorts of other things.
What is reality?
I also, while we're on the Black Boule thing, that Jonathan
Could you
Audi
describe, by
brings
the
up
way,
the Black
because
Boule.
when you actually brought up the Black Boule, I had no idea what that was.
I don't know a lot about it, and I think that there's a lot of versions of it. As like, I think that it's like, you know, Vatican conspiracies go all sorts of different directions. The Jew conspiracies go all sorts of directions. And the Black Boule, I think the understanding is that it traces back to like the black nobility and one of the royal families. And LeBron James does have a gigantic back tattoo of the crest, like the symbol itself of the Black Boule. Very literally the exact image. Or it's his chest, I think. It's like
I think it's on his chest. I think I saw that in your video. And
kind of weird.
So that's interesting that he's saying he's a member of this, especially as we're now learning so much about what took place at these Diddy parties. And I want to be clear here. We can't really discuss Cassie's testimony because I try to keep this show family friendly, and I just
There's
can't.
not a single piece of that is.
That is right. I can't read anything about these transcripts. Suffice it to say, they were into just the most debased, disgusting sexual stuff that you could possibly imagine. She was very clear that she was high on drugs throughout a lot of it. I completely believe that, based on what we've learned from Little Rod and learned from other people, including this guy, Jonathan Odie, that was definitively one component of this. But it's interesting that we're talking about the idea of these people selling out the Black community on behalf of somebody else, because there are some dogs that are not barking. That had me very concerned in this case, because I read through Little Rod's lawsuit and I very much expected that the Universal execs would be brought into this, into the hearing at the very least to testify. And also the biggest person missing here is Christina.
But his willingness to pose these questions publicly was enough to turn heads. Theo concluded his rant by referencing an unnamed media mogul he believes should be investigated further. This figure, according to Theo, is someone whose professional rise mirrors Diddy's in many ways. By tying them together, he aimed to spark curiosity about whether their paths intersected outside the official record. He didn't expand beyond that vague hint. It wasn't his style, but his implications left room for more questions than answers. And while Theo's tone stayed measured, there's no doubt his comments added another layer of pressure. If Owens' research started the fire, Theo's perspective is fanning the flames together. Their remarks are creating a level of public speculation that Diddy probably didn't anticipate. But how has Diddy reacted to this unfolding storm? That's where things get intense behind the scenes. Reports suggest that Diddy's reaction to the mounting claims from Candace Owens and Theo Von has been anything but calm. While Diddy has kept a stoic front, and public sources close to him describe a man struggling to manage the firestorm now surrounding his trial. Combine that with the media buzz about the so-called missing names, and it's easy to see why the pressure is starting to build. Privately, insiders allege he's been visibly frustrated, often questioning why these narratives are gaining traction and who's fueling them. According to people familiar with the situation, Diddy sees the claims from Owens in particular as a strategic attack on his credibility. She isn't just pointing fingers at him. She's implying that there's an entire network of powerful individuals who could be complicit, or at the very least avoidably silent. This kind of narrative strikes at the foundation of the public image Diddy has spent decades constructing.
in Lil Rod's lawsuit, he names the guy that was in charge of Diddy's computer system. He names the guy that was his tech guy that was in charge of all the cameras. And no one's ever spoken about him since. He's just gone.
There are some major dogs that are not barking here, and
and they're all the most important ones. Yeah. And we didn't mention Fahim Muhammad, who would be a pretty interesting dog to put on the stand, because Fahim Muhammad was one of the first people that we connected over. One of us made a video about him, and then the other one
I copied you,
right? And then that was the first time that that we kind of started interacting on content, and that rabbit hole started to go pretty deep. Diddy's head of security is named in this lawsuit, and he's named in this lawsuit as kind of the fixer, the guy that makes things go away, which is already pretty suspicious. And then one of my followers commented in my comment section that, hey, that dude was Michael Jackson's head of security. So I started digging into that, and that's absolutely true. And when you do the math, Michael Jackson's head of security, Fahim Muhammad, also Diddy's head of security, he graduated college like 1 year before Michael Jackson died in his care as his head of security.
One of two people that was there. It was the doctor.
Second on the scene.
And it was him.
And he graduated with a business and marketing degree with a specialty in real estate, which does not sound like head of security material to me.
He's not just a star. He's a mogul, someone who prides himself on control, and control is something he's reportedly losing grip on during this trial. Rumors have begun surfacing about tense conversations within Diddy's legal team. One insider allegedly claimed that Diddy's lawyers are advising him to stay focused on the facts of the case and avoid distractions from external speculation. But that's easier said than done. With media attention already amplifying quotes from Owens' podcast, his team is said to be scrambling to ensure that these side discussions don't create ripple effects in the courtroom, this balancing act defending him in court while managing the narrative outside of it has reportedly left Diddy irritable and at times overwhelmed. Adding fuel to the fire, Theo Von's comments have only amplified the scrutiny. It's clear that Van's outsider perspectives struck a chord with fans and skeptics alike. Some people online have even begun piecing together their own theories based on his vague hints and Owens' more direct approach. This has reportedly worsened Diddy's frustration as he believes these narratives are snowballing into something far beyond reality. This is spiraling out of control. One source allegedly quoted him as saying during a particularly heated conversation, "The heightened speculation, combined with his already demanding legal challenges, appears to be taking its toll." Legal experts observing the case suggest that if the claims about missing names get any more traction, it could complicate